But my name is Madeline Gent. I'm Executive Director of Associated Artists of Pittsburgh. Associated Artists of Pittsburgh exhibits, promotes, and supports the work of regional artists. We're a membership organization that is 111 years old. At that time, there were a few spaces in Pittsburgh in 1911 where one would find work by local artists. We're still wrangling the artists in many ways in Pittsburgh, but in many ways they're wrangling us because they're dying for different opportunities. Not dying is a very dramatic word in this moment. They want different opportunities. They want to present themselves just as any professional would as a working artist, and they would love to make livings off of their practice. And there are artists who do that. And so what we kind of do is provide those opportunities for one to do that. And we've been doing that off and on for other years. What we also provide is the ability to have your work like intellectually engaged, or critically engaged, I should say. Because we've had these relationships with these spaces and places, we kind of in many ways serve as a benchmark or a milestone for artists to get into the organizations, to get into the museum, to get their artwork seen. And now we've added the element of a lot more professional development. We do workshops on taxes and copyright protections and contracts and portfolio reviews on your practice and this and that, and mentorship opportunities, and partnering with whomever we can to make that happen. We really benefit by working with various partners in the community and supporting artists' work. I originally grew up about an hour and a half north of here in a town called Franklin, and actually at one point my grandmother lived in Lawrenceville, so I'm like weirdly connected in more ways than one, and she was a practicing painter herself. But my background is in more of the literary arts. I'm an art historian, I guess, by training, so writing would be my chosen art form. I lived in Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia for almost 15 years for my undergrad, and then for my graduate work, and I worked at the Freer and Sackler, which is the Smithsonian Museum of Asian Art, taught at the University of Maryland, taught at Johns Hopkins, did a curatorial fellowship, before knowing I wanted to return back closer to my family. Both my sister's still nearby, my parents are still nearby, and so I decided I wanted to come back here, and I found this job opportunity online and applied to become the director. And when I came in, one of the most important things was really cementing and building more relationships in the community. We had for a long time been the organization that we got our artists in the Carnegie, they checked that off, and that was kind of it. But in reality there is a lot more that goes into play into supporting artists. And so it's something that we used to do really, really well, and so we really wanted to get back into that and support a larger artist community. Artists that necessarily don't reach out to an organization like ours, artists that maybe don't have that traditional academic training, artists from marginalized communities, artists of color, LGBTQ plus artists. That, for me, was the work that we needed to do and that we are trying to do. In many ways, there's a lot of success and failures at it, but we're doing what we can and we're going to keep doing what we can. And a lot of that is through like the partnerships that I mentioned, partnering with other organizations who maybe do it better than us and supporting their work. But we are an organization of over 600 plus members, and that has just been growing. There's not this ideal number of artists we want to have, but you are juried in through a process, through your work is evaluated by external jurors. We just recently worked with a photographer from Atlanta and a practicing artist from Detroit to do the last round to kind of examine all the artwork. And really, on their specifications, there's nothing that I'm looking for that says this is art and this is not art, but rather that's what the juror is for, and that's why we hire them to do the work, to get their point of view. Pittsburgh's different. It's very much we call it like a big little city because it has the infrastructure of a much larger city. There was a time when the steel industry was booming and there were more jobs, and we just had a larger population. And since the collapse of the steel industry, the population has declined following that, though we do see upticks in certain age groups that suggest X, Y, and Z and otherwise. So what happens in Pittsburgh is you have a great place for emerging artists, like coming out of your Carnegie Mellons and your Pitts and your Point Parks, and they have kind of this moment where there's a lot of different spaces and places that they can show their work and get really excited and kind of get a following and audience, and then it kind of peters out a little bit. And then there's this great space for these established artists, these professors. They have been practicing and teaching for so long, and they come here, and it's an affordable way to live, and they find an kind of art buying market that's not huge, but they're making different things work. It's that mid-level queer that's a little bit harder, that I think when you have a city that has more commercial galleries, we have some, not a ton, that maybe there's more of that outlet for them, and so that's what we're trying to fill, that need here. And other spaces like Silver Eye Center for Photography or Boom Concepts or the Glass Center or Contemporary Craft are also doing that, providing kind of this more, just this additional way to get your artwork out there and get it seen by not necessarily just local individuals who may purchase your work, but a larger audience as well. And so we're kind of operating within that area where we don't, like I said, we don't have a ton of commercials, gallery spaces, but we have this infrastructure of what was once a larger city. So there's this feeling that they should be there, and there's not anymore. So how do we make it work with what we have?